Going guys, Eric here with another video. So today uh, I put together some ideas on how you can, some ways that you can distinguish whether a book is good and will have, a higher likelihood of having information that you're looking for, or it's trash and it's a waste of time. So let's dig into it. So first of all, I'm making the assumption that when we're reading, we're not reading to read. Okay? When we're reading, we're trying to get and extrapolate the maximally valuable principle from the information presented. So this would mostly pertain to, okay, somebody has a book, it has information that you might want, right? Now, how can we tell if there's a higher likelihood that it's going to be more valuable or there's more stuff, and how to prioritize? Because if something doesn't have as much information that you're really looking for and something else does, it'd be easier to help you discern which one would have a, would be better to put on your priority list than maybe some others. So I've kind of gathered some characteristics that both great books have and trash ones have. And here we go. So the purpose is, when you're reading, it's not to read, right? It's to gain the information, just in for what we're going for. Let's look. If so, most books have a picture or a portrait of the author. If they're smiling and their eyes are way open, they're they're not great, right? You see people like Susie Orman, okay, where it's just like that, and it's just kind of off-putting when you really look at it. It's just kind of like, oh my gosh, yeah. And their books are trash too. So, it was it written by a journalist? Okay, journalists tell stories to sell. Um, basically the book, the author, the stuff that's in it. They're telling you a story, right? But if you're looking for factual information, it you know the very beginning should not say once upon a time. Okay. Now, journalists do great work. It's just that we want to extract methods and principles from books that we can easily use and pull out and apply and utilize, right? When they tell you a story of, oh, this thing happened in this country or doing this, well, that might or might not get you to where you want to go. And especially if they tell you a story about something tragic, it's like, great. Yeah, that's great. Now I know about that, but how is that going to make my life better? Right? So if they're written by journalists, they tend to not be, they're not the best. Okay, so we're trying to scale everything. Now you can read that if you're going to be a journalist, you can read that. That's perfect. But if you're trying to, gain information that will make your life better, we might want to look at other things. Um, does the author live the life that you want? Right? Is the author speaking about something that you want to do and has all the successes in their life that you want? Right? That's interesting. So you have to dig into what the author's talking about and who they are and what experiences they had and what they have, right? Because if they don't have wisdom, well, that might be something you'd want. If they don't have the success that you want, if they don't have the knowledge that you want, if they're not in the field that you want, if they're not in blah blah blah, blah, it's not gonna work. And also, just who they are as people. Despite what they have, right? Is this person somebody I want to model myself after? Like if I could, if I had this person as a best friend or something, would I like to hang around them? Or do they have some characteristics that I want to develop in myself? It's like that would be a good question to ask, definitely. Are they too nice? Okay, too nice, like they're too pious. They donate to every single charity. They talk about, just way too much, like super nice behavior. They tend to not have the best. They tend to have the more skeletons in their closet, and they might not be truly honest. So what you're looking for is an edge, right? Now, what does that mean? It's kind of qualitative, like too nice, too this, too that. Well, the thing is if they constantly hit on I am virtuous, I am virtuous, I am virtuous, I am virtuous, this virtuous action, this is, and they call attention to it all the time, every single time. It's like, this person's so great, so great, blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's something there that they're hiding, right? We all have our positives and negatives, and if all they're showing is positives, what do you think they're hiding? They're negatives, and they might be doing something to not, so it might not be the best person to model after, especially if you're trying to gain information from them, but it's an edge, because if somebody has an edge, there's a reality to them. They show you, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, I'm going to speak from authenticity, because if somebody's really trying to hit the virtuous card, they might not be authentic, and the information might not be as credible, or tell you the truth, what you need to hear, or what I need to hear, for that matter. If it's an ebook, okay, if it's a free ebook, sure, you can take a gander and get it, but look, you can, it depends if it's long, because if it's a short ebook, like 50 pages, don't even. It's mostly just, yeah, no, it's not going to have true, and this is all on a scale, so you can go for it, but there might be other options out there. If it's brightly colored, if it has teals and bright yellows and things that pop, and there's cartoons everywhere, and it sounds like super nice, airy fairy, oh my gosh, it's a bad book. There's only one probably useful principle, and that one's probably like hard work. And they usually tell, it's like, of course, hard work gets you to where you want. Why do I have to spend $25 for you to just tell me the obvious? Now, of course, that might be useful to somebody, especially if they're just getting started trying to gather information and become wise, right? That might be helpful, but if you're trying to pursue more and more knowledge, those books don't really do it anymore. Prolific writer, 100 to 200 books. Either they're a genius or they're a complete idiot. So, because if you can't say something within 200 books, if you can't state a fact in 200 books, or get all your details, your logical processes, your methods down in 200 books, especially on the same topic, it's not going to, then it might not be the best to gather information, especially methods, which is most important, gathering methods so you can actually get the result that they have, instead of just having this feel thing, and they just tell you what the result is, but they don't tell you how to get there, or some quantitative ways for you to actually get the cause and effect relationship going in your life. But they have 100, 200 books, and they're all on different subjects, and you look at them and they're all structured and done completely different, and it's like, this guy's crazy. Like, you have novel writers who write different novels and stuff, and they write a ton of stuff. Now, if you're going to be a novelist, that would be good to dig into. And you see the overarching principles behind all the books, but they're all different, and that'd be cool, right? So then they'd be considered a genius, right? So this is just a difficulty, because when you learn how to speed read, you can gather information. Your eyes get drawn to the most important bits of information. Ignore the rest. Like, you ignore the ands, you ignore the thes, the a's, like all the words that don't really mean anything. They just become conjunctions that link things together, link concepts together. You can ignore those, but if you have these certain words that guide you to the most valuable principle, like, so because of all this, you have blank. Or, so the proposition that we are proposing here is, right? So there's words that indicate the most valuable principle in the text, and that's what you're trying to sift for and read, because most of it's just observation of obvious things, especially when you read a lot, because there's a lot of different writers that write the same book over and over again. right? There's this author, this author, this author, and they all write on the same thing and they sound exactly the same. But you only know that if you read all those books and you're like, yeah, they really don't say anything, you know, or like you read the one, you got it, but then repeating it over and over is not really helpful, especially if you got the concept down. So if they tell you a story, okay, that makes it harder to get that principle because you have to make sure that you read all the words in order to get the principle. And a lot of times the authors uh, pick the wrong principle to sum up at the end. So imagine the tortoise and the hare principle, right? We all know the principle where it's like, okay, you know, it's good to push all the way to the end and don't get distracted or lazy before actually completing the thing that you were intending, right? And then the author would say, because they go through that entire story, get you pulled in, and then they say, so if we're going to be the rabbit, make sure we have an energy drink in the last quarter so that we don't run out of energy. What? Like, they come up with a principle that makes no sense, that has no continuity with the story, but that's the principle. I don't know if they're trying to be funny or educational or something, or do something different, but it's not helpful for what we want. Because how are we going to use, drinking energy and drinking the fourth quarter? How am I going to use that? How are you going to use that? So that might be something to look out for. Except in the Plato dialogues, they're hard to read because of that, right? They're hard to read. Instead of just laying out the claim, explaining it through arguments, having different methods of questioning, and then summing it up at the end with maybe something new or developing, right? So it would be easier to read that way, and that's kind of what Aristotle did. Even though the concepts are heavy, still, it's just much easier to read. Argument. So you have the claim, the argument, and then the refutation, and then the new claim argument. And if it's listed like that, you can have books where there's a valuable piece of information, like 2 on a page, which is ridiculous. Because some books, they have stories and stories and stories and stories, and at the very last page, they have something that may or may not be worth the time that you invested looking for it. So we'll look into that. Academic publishers, or publishers that have a specific genre that they have. Like Wiley kind of focuses on business and investments, that kind of stuff. Academic press, kind of, you know, a lot of use of statistics, and that kind of also goes with another one, which is if it looks boring, if the art is horrible, if there's no pictures except statistics, right? If the colors are awful, awful, awful colors. There's no aesthetic appeal at all on the entire book. And if you looked into author's history, no art ever in their in ever. It's a good book. It's a good book because they'll tell you the facts, or you know, they'll have all their stuff, and then they'll have the claim at the end, and it will be clear, and it will be boring, and it will present it in factual manner. And those things that you can just sift through, okay, statistics, blah blah blah, this means that, blah 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 blah, and that's what you're looking for, and they'll say it, right? Because they're not burying it in a story, right? They're not burying it in a story, so you're not having to work as hard in order to find those words that call attention to it. If it has cartoons, it's garbage. It's garbage. And you know that. Like imagine you're in school, and you know those books that have the cartoons to make education fun? Right? Like they don't. Because you're being forced to, and the value that they have is little to none because they have to force you to do it. Right? Because you don't know what the value is. Because if you knew the value, they wouldn't have to have the cartoons. They wouldn't have to have the fancy titles. They wouldn't have to have this, that, or the other. Because you'd be like, oh, I'm getting the information so I can, you know, take this and use it and make systems in my life that will be better. You don't need all the fluff, right? Cartoons don't add any value. It's like YouTube clickbait, you know? It's like it's cool, but then you throw it away and you never want to think about it. There's no residual benefit. It's just entertainment. boring font and super close spacing are indicators that it's a good book. Because if it's really spread out, chances are they're telling a story, they're telling a dialogue, and which is fine. It's just we're looking for information here, and we want it in the best, most easy to read under. Because when you're speed reading, you don't want to move your hand that much, right? And you also use your periphery to see what came the line after and maybe before, so that you can catch the details that you may have missed when you're just glancing over it. That's why the spacing super close really helps, especially if they use colorful words that involve touch or some sort of visual or some sort of action or some sort of sound related thing that you can associate with something real, instead of like the nebulous systems of constructs in which we are proposing, and it's so difficult to read to actually know what they're talking about. And books and literature are not exactly the best form in terms of communication, because if I had a question, I wouldn't be able to ask the author. Of course not. Footnotes contain more valuable information than the actual text that is being presented, right? It's like you have, well, it is incredibly complex subject matter for which we are discussing in the overall context of science and math and literature and everything else that runs our modern society. We have found that the most important thing to understand is that blank, according to the math in the back of the book. It's like maybe that should have been in the main body, and all the fluff and stuff. I was going to say another word because, you read it so much, but nobody knows what it means because it could mean anything to anybody. Society could mean that society, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, right? It's difficult to know what they're talking about if you can't ask them, but when they have something that's a claim and something that's real and solid based on the evidence that they present in the book, okay, we can only go on with evidence, and then they're like, we have found, according to this data, that blank means blank. This caused that or has a correlation with this. And you might be able to now extrapolate a principle. That's what we're trying to do. We're taking information and extrapolating a principle to make our lives better. Okay, next one. Also, if they have those footnotes in weird places, there's one, Thank You for Arguing, is a horribly formatted book because all the different things, blocks, where they have principles or ideas are all over the different pages. The spacing's really wide, and the text in the box is more useful than the actual text in the book. Not in the book, of course, but in the actual lines, right? It's in the box. And then also it has a lot of dialogues and stories in it. It's hard to read, especially trying to go fast, and you want the information, right? I don't want this fluff. Okay, I accept, I bought the book, I know that you're knowledgeable on this, I'm trying to get your information because I'm trying to get to know what you know. I don't need the story. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it, but no thank you. Footnotes. If the author's dead, if the author's dead and there's multiple editions, get the first edition or one of the early ones, because editing is mostly about taking things out. And so if we wanted the information from the author, not just some guy that's just looking through it and then slapping their name on it so they can get the royalties, that's not a bad business. It's just that we want the information, okay? So we get the one that they closely released, the first one, and then maybe if we couldn't get the first one, maybe the second one, the third one, kind of closest to the original author as we can, because usually editing involves taking things out, and that's not really what we want. Okay, we want to make that choice, and really additions, they only add some other person to make a foreword to something, and really the content really doesn't change. So depending on if you know the person who's doing the foreword, that might be cool, but we want the information more than anything else. If it's an interview, like a recorded interview, like what would be done on TV, they ask general questions that don't lead anywhere, and they're followed up with a whole bunch of, rehearsed PR speak from the person that's actually running the corporation or whatever, it's usually trash, because the interviewer doesn't know how to ask questions in terms of targeting specific words to make sure, or not to make sure, but to get deeper meaning behind what they mean. I don't know what when one entrepreneur says culture is important, what culture is he talking about, right? What is good to you? What is good to you? Like, I don't know what that means for them. And if the interviewer asks those questions, it would be much better. But they don't. They just move from this question that they prepared, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and then the interview's over and nobody learned anything, right? So if it's structured like that, it might be not as good. But the exception is if the person interviewing is knowledgeable in the subject matter and actually has the background information to kind of know what these things mean and then ask the deeper questions, right? But if it's just a journalist asking some billionaire what his company does, it's trash. It's trash. Um, uh, Having a whole bunch of descriptions that don't extrapolate into principle and don't have any qualitative, like it's just a bunch, you know. It's like they saying, music is a very interesting subject matter for us to discuss, and so when we delve deeper into what it means to really make music, we can overcome and extrapolate a much larger principle of human society and human principles and human greatness that no other species on this planet has ever done before. Whole lot of nothing in a big, huge nothing burger. They said nothing, just a whole bunch of words that sound nice, but they don't mean anything. It's a word salad, right? It's supposed to make them sound smart, but cool. I want to know what you know. I don't care about the word salad. Okay. But they make a whole bunch of descriptions. Well, there's, musical relationships and context and interests and everything coming together into one cohesive unit. Ugh, it's like nobody knows what that means, okay? Yeah, and everybody can see that, but, how does that help you any? It doesn't. Small print is also an indication of a very intelligent book because, I don't know, big print makes it easier to read, of course, but if there's a lot of information, they tend to shrink the print, and it usually is in academic papers where it's the smallest. That usually indicates that it's at least better, so that's cool. Ascribing new names to obvious phenomenon, right? It's like cause and effect. I could just name it. No, you can just name it whatever and pretend it sounds intelligent or make it sound intelligent by doing census and peer group stuff or whatever, but it's cause and effect. Like, it's been around forever. You don't need to slap a new name on it, right? And it obscures the meaning. It obscures what you're talking about. And so if you start seeing that and it's talking about some principle or whatever that you already know, this whatever. If it says paradox, it's written by an idiot. Period. Okay. There's no, like, Aristotelian, right? There's no contradiction, and all you have to do is think far enough and logically about these two elements that are supposedly in contradiction to each other and realize that they're talking about two different things going like this. And then the person only sees one dimensionally like that, and they look like they're in conflict when really they're like this. Okay? It's because they haven't actually thought about it, or the method in which they're thinking about it is insufficient. If they give you symbolism without actually giving you a key to understand it or a method to understand the symbolism, you're just wasting your time. It's a waste of time. Because you don't know what it means in the first place. Because if somebody's talking about this story and it's totally illogical, and you're just like, what do these words mean? What are these people doing? What do they represent? I don't know. Like, it's so difficult. And if they don't give you a key to get resources, at least to know what the symbolism means so that the things can be perfectly coherent, it's gonna be, I would be running my wheels, but I wouldn't be getting anywhere. So, and there's better things that we could be doing too. Uh, Proverbs, poems, and lyrics can be incredibly beautiful, but they can be contradictory, illogical, and don't really convey anything valuable. And now, if you're listening to a good song to become a songwriter, to know what is great and what is not, and develop your preferences like that, you're not really looking at and extracting information in terms of, oh, this means this that I can use in my life, right? In terms of what the lyric means, it's more like the structure, like, oh, this writer used this word, and this word that kind of made this continuity in relation to this line and this line and this line, so that you could go out and you could mimic it in your song. Great. But if you're not a songwriter, chances are that it'd be much more difficult to relate to and to actually get to some at least closer truth, especially in Proverbs, because sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. But it's how would we know if they're good or not, right? And then we'd have to have a logical process in order to know that. Cool. If you look at the author and they have a history of depression and their overall wisdom, if you had to appraise their wisdom in terms of their life and how they've acted and how they've done things, and you would consider this person unwise, yeah, probably their books and their writings and what they think is also unwise, because ideas occupy the same space and they traverse each other, right? So if somebody writes something in a book that still came from them, right? And if they think about, depression, and they're super anxious and they hide all these things with drugs and alcohol. Now, of course, within moderation, those things are fine, right? Whatever. But if it's excessive, it's because they haven't been able to surpass those traumas using and reflecting on them and knowing themselves enough to actually fix the problems and to find something better. And so if they have a history of trauma and depression in their life and it never got fixed, they never went out and fixed it, then chances are their writings reflect that too. So, John Paul Sartre is one. Not really somebody that you really, if you want to find meaning in your life, not really somebody you want to listen to. And, his life reflects that if you look at his life. It's pretty crazy. Another way that a book is bad is that they give you no method. They just give you a bunch of descriptions. We already talked about that. Chapter titles that you have no idea what the chapter's about. It's like, never trade your belugas for trumpets. What does that mean? And then you look and it's like some totally... It's not worth your time. It's not worth your time. The best books have the most important principles in bold, italics, or separated from the rest of the paragraphs. And they also have a recap of what they talked about in the thing. Those books are amazing. If you find those books where it has the thesis right on the front and center in one sentence or less, and then they have the italicized or bold or the main core principles that they're proposing, those books are gold. Gold books. Amazing. And it's easy to read. And the thing is that they have all the arguments and all the statistics in the body of the paragraphs if you don't believe it. Right? And then you look, and then you can look at the studies, which are in the back of the book, and it's beautiful. Beautiful. Best books have the claim at the beginning, all the arguments through the rest of the book. They're usually italicized to build it up. And then it has the claim at the very end with a recap checklist or something like that. A recap, and it's usually a separate section, and it's great. That's also amazing. When you see that, that's amazing. Usually the best books are 250 pages. Well, it's like 200 to 300 to like 200 and up is safe. safe, whatever that means. It's not like they're going to hurt you or anything. But chances are, the more, I don't want to say the more pages, because that's not true, because sometimes it could be full of fluff too. But usually you'll know when you get halfway through the book how the book is written and how many, essential nuggets that you've gotten so far and how much you can project into the future. But usually good books are more than, 200 to and up to 1,000 pages. Uh, if it looks boring, sounds boring, the name's boring, it's written in a boring way, if it's dusty, like nobody's ever checked it out for the past 20 years, it's probably a good book. Just saying. Because there's a lot of books like that in the library, and a lot of people sit there and study on their computers, and nobody checks out a single book. And there's probably more and better information than in those books than what they could find on the first page of Google, just by looking around and knowing where things are. Because if you don't know what to look for, you can't find it on Google, right? So how are you going to reach out and try to find something new if all you can do is put in a search bar what you know? It's difficult. It's hard. It's harder. How much do you want to be like the author? If the author's super amazing, like you love them and you love their style of speaking, or you have some sort of connection with them, you might want to get their book just because you want to be like them. You want to maybe say some of the similar words and kind of take those attributes onto yourself, and that might be something to do with a little visualization and imagination stuff, exercises that you can use with it, which is great. So that might be something you want to consider. No negations of what they said before. Now, in the Plato's dialogues, they go from one thing, and then they find the truth, and then they change it, and then they change it, and then they change it, and they change it, and at the very end, nobody knows what's going on anymore. Or they have the claim, but it's still uncertain, right? Now, I'm not going to say that that's because Plato's dialogues are pretty heavy stuff, but in terms of easy to read and clarity and actually getting to closer to the truth or getting the information that you really need, if somebody has a super long paragraph of something that they're proposing and they're like, actually, no, it's not true, like a throwaway line, well, it could be easy for me especially, to miss that since I speed read, right? It'd be like I'm reading through, okay, this person thinks this, okay, that's useful. Nope, never mind. He doesn't believe that. It's bull. It's like, what a waste. What a waste. Well, at least you know what it's not, which is also helpful for logic and reason, but, if they propose that, like, this is not true, this is why, that'd be easier to read, and then you have lots of no, 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 this is not it, this is not it, this is not it, this is not it, so it'd be very difficult for it to miss, right? If there's one throwaway line and we miss it, we pretend like that was what that the author was claiming, and that's problematic. Yeah, explaining a concept in depth and negating it in a small passing line. There's also another one which is secondary primary source. Somebody talking about getting references from other people versus somebody actually living the experience. Now, getting a primary source witness can be kind of biased because memory is kind of faulty at times, and then secondary source can kind of piece things together. So if you just know what that is, it might give you a better way to context it. Now let's talk about why people read books for different reasons. Well, if we're gathering information, this would probably be helpful. Now, if we wanted to learn how to write books or convey information, making it super easy to read would be helpful. So knowing what books that are easy to read, and then we duplicate those, right? If we're a historian and all we're focused on is getting facts right, we read books and get sources, and we try to verify things or ask questions to get the facts right. But just reading history is not enough. Because if you read history and you know when this army marched here, that doesn't tell you the maximally valuable principle of why each army won, or which one won, because both can win, right? Of course. Why which one won. And so knowing the fact that he had 20,000 strong and this guy only had, they both had 20,000 strong, you know that they were evenly matched. Okay. Now you know which one won in a drastic way. So why did that happen? What was the detriment of the other army, and what was the gain of the other army? Well, they had lots of sleep. There was a cohesive army. They all loved and served the leader. They thought he was, some sort of demigod, like in Caesar's case, right? He won battle after battle and battle and battle and battle, over and over, and they just believed that they would win. And they were completely cohesive, completely coherent in the way that they worked. All the leaders were there, right? They knew exactly what it needed to be done. They were a well-oiled machine. And the other one, they were incohesive. There was infighting. Soldiers didn't know why they were fighting for. Why? You get the picture. Those facts, to extrapolate the wisdom from that history, would benefit us more than knowing, who was born what, or memorizing rote facts that don't mean anything. And if you ask them, and if you ask, maybe, of course, teachers are different. All teachers are different. But if you asked one that was particularly foolish, they wouldn't be able to tell you the core principle, because that's not what they're looking for. Okay? And the purpose, and what we're talking about here, let's check the time, 30 minutes, oh wow. Yeah, so we just want to extract wisdom from reading books. And so here are some ways to know and discern whether a book has that wisdom you're looking for. So thank you so much, guys. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section, and your kind of trail and reading and looking into things. So see ya.